Have you ever felt yourself growing and then secretly wondering if your marriage can really handle it? Maybe you're a high achieving Christian woman in business or in leadership. You feel God stretching you, inviting you into a new season, but you can sense some tension at home because of it. Your goals are changing, your identity is shifting, and you're afraid your growth might threaten the relationship that you care about most, or at least you should be caring about most. In today's episode of Don't Waste the Chaos, I'm bringing my husband Terry back on the show to talk about something really real and really tender. And that is what happens when one partner grows and the other partner feels left behind. Here are some of the things we get into. We talk about how our individual seasons of growth, professionally, spiritually, and personally, have impacted the dynamic of our marriage. We talk about the very real fear I had when Terry left a salaried job to go into sales and the rule I made for myself so I didn't weaponize that decision later. We talk about what it looked like for him to completely downshift after years of burnout while I was ramping up and launching my business, and how we're now thinking about things like retirement, purpose, and identity as a Christian couple in this next season of life. Terry also shares about a 365-day devotional that he's been building around identity and how focusing on identity in Christ has helped him deal with insecurity, comparison, and those left behind feelings that can quietly sabotage a marriage if we don't name them. If you and your spouse are in a season where one of you is sprinting and the other one of you feels stuck, if you've ever caught yourself saying, I don't even know who I am anymore. Am I just a wife? Am I just a mom? Or if you are afraid that your growth might cost you your marriage, then this conversation is for you. And my prayer is that this episode gives you language, hope, and some very practical ways to stop working on each other and start serving each other again while still honoring the calling that God has placed on your life. All right, so let's get into it. Here's my conversation with my husband, Terry, on what to do when one person grows and the other feels left behind. All right, Terry, welcome back to the pod.
Thank you.
So we talked about this a little bit before we started the recording, but today we're going to jump into kind of a mix of topics, but the primary construct is around our identities. And I know this has been something that you've been working on, research that you've been doing for years. For those of you who don't know, Terry's been slowly writing a book on identity, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about that if he wants to. But primarily today, we're talking about this when one partner grows and the other feels left behind. And I think so many times, whether it comes to our health or growing in education or growing in our business or growing in our relationships, it can be threatening to our partners because we're going in a new direction. If we've got a partner who maybe has any fear, maybe has been abandoned, maybe is dealing with insecurities, they might be nervous about us expanding in that way, meeting new people, furthering ourselves. They might start to think that there's a number of things that they can fill their head with, actually. And so that's what I want to focus on today, because you and I have both been through seasons where one of us has been up and one of us has been down, or one of us has been ready for a change and the other one of us hasn't, whether it's been school or relationships or even stuff with your daughters and my stepdaughters. There's been a lot of different seasons in our life. And so I just think that this could be hopefully an inspiration to others when they're maybe holding themselves back because they're afraid of the strength of their marriage or their partner to be able to handle that. So any thoughts before I jump into this topic and ask some questions?
I think it's just a good reminder in a marriage for each other to, and they're not always going to remember because of distractions, but when you have that opportunity and it is at the top of mind, to remind each other that you're not there to take from each other, you're there to serve one another. So even if your partner is in a season of growth and it's intimidating you for whatever reason, it's still your responsibility to be supportive of them.
Easier said than done.
Yep.
How do you do that?
That's a good question. It's something I've been working on being more intentional about recently, which is asking myself a few questions as part of a daily devotional that I've been building for myself rather than following someone else's. And it's a 365-day devotional, and it's focused on identity all 365 days. And each day references a specific scripture that is related to our identity, what the foundation of it is, where it comes from, and prompts me to ask myself questions so that when I feel something that isn't an emotion that's not healthy for me, whether it's pride or jealousy or whatever the case is, it prompts me to go back to my devotional and ask myself, why am I feeling that way? And it's a fairly new practice for me because it's a brand new devotional I just started working on, but I just started applying it yesterday and that's been helpful.
Mm, that's really fresh to death. It makes me think of, gosh, this is maybe a little off topic, but maybe related. When you were doing your weekly mentorship with Larry Glabe, your mentor, your spiritual mentor, he had you charting your emotions on an Excel doc.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what it's reminding me of. It's just maybe the awareness, the reflection that's almost just as powerful as what you learned from it. It's just slowing down and letting yourself feel and think, what is going on inside of me? Where do I feel this in the body? Or what could have brought this up? And how do I want to respond with intention instead of just out of my emotions?
I think once you can identify your emotions and then try and think about why you're feeling that emotion, it prompts that focus to be on yourself rather than the person that you think is triggering your emotion.
Mm. Yeah, that's so good. Well, I wrote down a couple of questions to kind of keep us moving down this path so we might veer off of here a little bit like we already have, but some things that I'm hoping can help us get to the heart of the matter and really inspire some other folks. So when one of us has gone through a major season of growth, and you can think about this, professionally, personally, or spiritually, relationally, how has that shifted? Try to think of one of the times. How has that shifted the dynamic between us and what changed that maybe you didn't expect?
I'm trying to think of a time like when you were in a growth season for something specific and I didn't feel supportive. I wasn't good at showing that I was supportive, but I don't know when there would have been a time where I was totally against what you were growing at in that season. I don't know what that would have been, but
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
sure
maybe.
you could list some times where you didn't feel like you were being supported because I was just focusing on myself.
Well, maybe don't think about it as a time where you didn't feel supportive. Maybe think about a time when I was making a change, whether that was friends, whether that was spiritually or professionally, and it just stretched you, or it was hard for you, or it kind of felt like we were going in two different directions.
I mean, the first example, one of the few I can come up with is if we're in a crowd of people that you know and I don't, and it's a crowd of people, that's hard for me to feel comfortable in just because I don't feel comfortable in a large group of people that I don't know. But it's not because of you. It's just because of the group of people there that I don't know. Like if it's a professional setting, networking events, whatever, just like Main Street Summit. We went to one of those and I don't feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, and I say in that instance, we've kind of learned how to balance that. You come in town with me now when I do the Main Street Summit. You don't attend the summit with me. I go to the summit myself, you go to work, and then we focus on our relational time in the evenings. I don't do the evening events, or if I do, I bring you with me. And because I'm valuing, I am comfortable in those settings. I want to be in those settings like desperately, probably because I work from home all the time, or it would exhaust me too. But since I am alone so often, I am really excited about those. And we've just kind of met in the middle. We still want to spend the time together, but we just do that in the evenings. You work during the day. I learn. You listen to my nonstop madness after I hit my bat and we sit at Cherry Street to eat. And I tell you all of the new business ideas I have and everything that I learned and the people that inspired me and the books that I pick up. And you just kind of entertain me through that.
Yeah, I think, but going back to in a setting where I'm not comfortable like that, I think it boils down to anybody whenever they feel uncomfortable, the root of it is some sort of in insecurity. And thinking about most of the time, I don't. Like most people wouldn't even acknowledge or admit that they're insecure about anything, even if they're right in the middle of it. If they do enough reflection, they might admit it later because they're actually processing it and they don't feel targeted whenever they're processing the feelings of insecurity. So like part of the devotional I'm putting together is asking myself what part of my identity feels threatened right now. And if I feel like I'm around somebody that's lazy, is it potentially triggering my identity as being honorable? If I'm feeling insecure and I'm around somebody that it's being just disrespectful, does it actually trigger my identity of being loyal? Just trying to put all those pieces together. If they're super confident, does it just trigger my insecurity in general? If somebody is super successful, does it trigger my comparison wounds from childhood or whatever? And just trying to think about all of that. It's like a more than a full-time job to process that whenever you're experiencing some sort of insecurity. But I think it starts with acknowledging that you're insecure in situations like that.
One of the things that I I was thinking that I had struggled with, let me take you back to a hot day in Jamaica. And we were sitting at the table together and you said, I am going to leave my salaried position and I am going to go into sales. And I said, nah, no, thank you. We've talked about this. We talked about it when I was pregnant. Actually, you were going to do it then. And I found out I was pregnant. And I remember we just went round and round, and you decided to stay. And the place that you were at gave you more money. And you were like, I'm going to stay. And I was like, thank goodness, because I'm pregnant and I was high risk. And I was just nervous. I was really nervous because you were going to take a sales position. And so we kept it at bay for a few years. And then we find ourselves post a mission trip where we've been building houses out of concrete. And we're sitting at this beautiful resort after we've been working our butts off. And you look at me and say, I'm ready now. And I was like, I don't think I can fight you on this again. I wanted to. I was so uncomfortable. And I know I was uncomfortable because of I had always been a salaried worker, and I still was a salaried worker at that time, and had never been in business for myself. And I liked knowing what my paycheck was going to be. I liked knowing what your paycheck was going to be. I just felt like we were fine, and you were like rocking the boat harder than I wanted you to rock it. But you said, you're going to have to trust me. I've run the numbers. I'm not going to do it. When have you seen me fail? We just went through all of this stuff. And I was like, I didn't know there was no other like door for me to walk out of. I felt like I had to go with you on it, but that was really scary for me. And one of the things that I talked through with myself is, if you agree to this, you cannot hold it over his head if it doesn't work. Like, if it doesn't work out, he tried, you tried, you can't say like, I knew it. I told you. All that stuff is bullshit, especially in a marriage. Like, how damaging. We have all of these places in our lives that have held us down or put us down. And so I knew as your wife that if I agreed to it, then I had to be all in. I had to be supportive. I had to be energetic, excited. And I think this is where I see a lot of people in marriage. They like allow their spouse to make the choices that they want to make, but they don't truly get behind them. And I think it's kind of setting the spouse up for failure, because if you know that your partner doesn't really support you, then you kind of keep one foot out the door because you're like, this might fail. And I'm going to need to pick up the pieces pretty quick because my partner already wasn't in agreement with it. And so it sets you up for this failure, versus when your partner is like, all right, let's freaking go. Like, I believe in you. You've got to do it all the way. And we're going to set up a plan. I think we said 2 years. Like, if within 2 years you feel like, and you were like, I'm going to know within a year, Kerri, but like within a couple of years, if this isn't bearing fruit, then you won't do it anymore. And, of course, You're still in mortgage right now. So that was a long time ago. I think Keegan was like 2 or 3 and he's almost 14. But that was a time that I was thinking about that I saw you changing and I was scared. And I'm excited that I'm not going to say I let you do it. I'm excited that I was like, all right, I'm in this with you and I'm going to be your cheerleader. And what the change that I didn't expect is I ended up going into sales as well, like a decade later, because you kind of showed me. It took me a while. I had to watch you for quite a while, but you kind of showed me what it looks like to set your own path financially and to not wait around for someone to freaking bless you with the 3% increase or whatever that looks like, or, beg for variable comp or constantly have to be proving yourself from a project basis or what the things that I've been doing for 20 years. I finally let go of that. That's the change that I didn't expect. As scary as it was when you did that, I never expected that I would follow a decade later.
Yeah, when you were saying that, I was thinking of the foundation of marriage is to serve one another, and what a lot of people, if not everybody, they're focusing on trying to work on one another instead of serve one another. And if they work on themselves and serve one another, their marriage is going to be a little bit more healthy and supportive whenever they're going through a growth phase, whether it's fast or slow. Because if you were not supportive, because it wasn't easy when I made the move, it wasn't easy when you made the move. That first couple of years for me, like it was terrible. And
Yeah.
because I'm not a salesperson, I'm a process person, which is the only way I think I was ever successful at sales, was just breaking it down into the process. But it made it extremely hard for me. And if you were trying to work on me, be better at sales instead of serve by supporting me, grind through it, especially those first few years, there's no way I would have been able to get through to the other side.
Yeah, I agree. I see that. I think about, a night not that long ago, maybe a couple of months ago, where I was like, do you want me to go back to work? Like, do you want me to go back to working for someone else? I just feel like I'm failing. I did this last Christmas at the end of year two, almost at the end of year two. I did this at the end of year one in my business because this is hard. Starting a business is really hard. And even though the top line revenue's been there, I've spent it in weird ways on weird people and it hasn't made the most sense. But I had to learn those lessons myself. And there were times when I could feel that you would have done it in a different way. And you've even told me a couple of times, like, I would focus on this, Kerri. I would focus on this before you do anything else. I would focus on just selling. I would focus on what's bringing you the most money. Like there's been a few times where you've said it, whether I was listening to you at that point or not. But ultimately, even though I could feel that things were rocky or maybe you would have done it in a different way, you usually would say, well, is that what you want? Instead of you pushing an agenda on me.
Yeah, I mean, I would be much more supportive of you doing what you want, even if it's hard for you, if that's what you want. Again, it's back to serving through supporting than you doing what I want you to do if it's something different because I think it benefits me more the other way, which would be I'm just telling myself a lie at that point because if I'm trying to encourage you to do something that I want that you don't want to do, how is that supportive?
Yeah. And it's making me think about really, if you are a person that wants your spouse to tell you what to do, here's my hot take on that. It's because you aren't confident enough in your own self to say, this is what I freaking want and I know I can do it. So it's easier if you say, well, my husband doesn't want me to, or whatever. When I hear people say that stuff like, my husband won't let me, or my wife would never, it's like, maybe people do suck that much. Maybe people do lock each other down in marriage that much, but I just can't imagine a world where I would say, this is what I want. Here's the plan on how I'm going to get there. and I'm being mature about it, not emotional. And you would be like, I forbid you to. I really don't know. I bet you in most marriages, that's the case, but it's easier to blame because we have fears and insecurities ourselves. So it's easier to blame our inertia on our spouse. Kind of like, I want to be healthier, but my husband likes Cool Ranch Doritos. We just can't keep the crap. Or I have little kids, and you know how they like Takis or whatever it is. Like blaming it on someone else instead of making the change yourself is so much easier, but gross.
I think that makes sense in the scenarios where it's something that would truly be beneficial for the marriage. There are other situations where the spouse needs to step up and prohibit that other spouse from going down that direction because of past experiences, current circumstances, future hopes and dreams.
Yeah. I think we can probably think of an example that we talked about privately yesterday, and I won't go into it on this show, but dang, yes. Okay, so let's talk about fast growth versus slow growth tension. Have there been seasons where one of us was sprinting ahead and the other felt stuck? What did that look like in real life? Not a cleaned up version, but our actual messy version. And we might actually kind of be in this right now, would you say?
I would, I thought more about when I had left my job of 10 years and started a new job. It was the same job, just for a different company. And shortly after that, you started your own company. So you were off to the races, and I was still in major decompression mode from the burnout of the previous 10 years. So it kind of felt like we were going opposite directions, because the last thing I wanted to do was grind at that point, and you had to, and you wanted to, and you saw the opportunity, and I didn't want anything to do with that pace for my job at the time.
That's so true. That's one of those moments, and I'll mention grad school here in a minute, but that's one of those moments where it's like, if I wasn't disciplined, then I would have been walking around the woods with you. I kind of wanted to, but I was also really energized by my new business, and I was excited to be working for myself, and I was energized by it. I love setting up the foundation and the processes and figuring out the tech and all of that stuff. Those are things that I actually enjoy. And so it was life-giving for me to work. And I was writing the book and I was preparing for the podcast. But yeah, you were definitely like in a major downshift. And I had kind of downshifted already when I left the insurance firm, the first the first one when I sold my shares. I had taken those 5 months, and I feel like I had done some of that downshifting during those 5 months. So then I had that brief stint back at that M&A firm for 6 months before I actually was like, now's the time. So I had already had that. But yeah, when you left the mortgage institution and then went into the banking world, you're right. You weren't trying to work more. And I almost couldn't get enough of my business at that time.
I knew that I knew it would not be healthy to work more, but it didn't feel like a healthy move. That was my first time of really taking a step back since I entered the workforce when I was 15 years old. It had been, I don't think I was working full time at 15, but it was pretty close to it once I turned 16, and there was never a break. And as time went by, the more I worked, not necessarily clock in hours, but being preoccupied 24/7 with what I was doing. And so that would have been 20, I don't know, let's just say 25 years, 26 years of, I know there's a ton of people that do it, but it also helped me realize, like not the millennials, but the baby boomers, who are much more likely to work 30 years, 40 years at the same job, doing the same thing over and over again, and their goal is retirement. So they work through life, then they retire, and then they realize they feel like they have no purpose, and they die sooner than what they would have had they paced themselves, not overspent, that prompted them to work longer to pay for the things that they didn't need, that they were buying in order to impress a bunch of people that don't really care to begin with or don't even like them. And thinking about that is a big part of making it through that. It was probably an 18-month transition when I left that last company after 10 years of really trying to slow down.
Yeah. I can remember asking you, like, how tightly wound do you feel like you are? And it was like still 95%. And then I remember over time, it was like, it was 40 some percent. And it's like the slow, it took years to your point to really watch you shed it. And the interesting thing is I see you try to fight getting back in those ski tracks. Like you don't want to get back into that. But my therapist has helped me learn that if you're a person who's conscious, then the odds are so much higher that you won't do that thing that you don't want to do. It's the people who are walking aimlessly through life that have no control over that. You do have control. You've learned control. You've recognized things about yourself. You've grown in this way. And so I'm not saying like let it go and forget about it and be ignorant, but so many times those of us who are like, I just don't want to be like blah, blah, blah. The odds are you won't be like that because you are consciously aware of it. It is in your psyche. You've learned those things. You've processed those things. And so you can kind of let go and enjoy and move and reevaluate over time. I was thinking about when we were dating, right? Or were we married? When we started grad school, we were just dating at first.
No, we were married.
No, we weren't.
Oh.
We weren't married yet because I remember taking the girls up to WashU with you. We were just dating, and I had that
We were
stupid
married when we
Sebring
graduated.
convertible. Yes. Yeah, I was pregnant when we graduated. But when we first started, when we were dating, you had said like, hey, there's this cool opportunity where I could go back to school. And you and I had both been in previous relationships where the person was like, what do you think? You're better than me? What do you think? What do you need more for? Like, don't you already have enough? And it was like this shame that was put on us, and both of us, even though we were in very different situations, we both had experienced that. And so when you were like, I've already got a master's, but I was kind of thinking about getting another one. I've got this cool opportunity. And I was like, I want to get a master's. I've been wanting to get a master's. Like, let's do it at the same time. And that was a time in our relationship where it was like, I felt like I knew if you were in grad school and I wasn't, I'd be like, let's go get margaritas, or if I was in grad school and you weren't, it'd be like, come shoot with me or do whatever. And you're not making time for me and, come watch this movie or whatever. And so I was like, oh my gosh, let's both do it. And at that time we were young. We both had tons of energy. We were both like, yeah, let's freaking roll. I think ideally you get in a place in your marriage where you don't have to pace the same. You can be like, okay, you're doing that and that's fine. And I'm going to hold down the fort during this, or times when you're grinding and I'm like, I'll take Keegan to and from school. Or, now we've got to this place where we kind of share responsibilities well. But I used to think we had to be on the same page or it was going to be wobbly. But what I've learned is we don't have to be pacing the same. We just have to be communicating about the goals, how long it's going to take, what the commitment is, and making sure that the other person still feels supported, even if they're the one not pacing as hard.
Trust is important too, because you could be going through a hard time and you say something that you would like that's not responsible, like just selling everything and just stopping all of it. But I think that brings me back to the point that I was making earlier. If you don't have some sort of semi-retirement plan, like 10 years before your hard line of actual retirement where you're not working, that's going to put you in a dangerous situation, because if you're not careful, you're not focused on your identity, not only are you going to be harder, it'll be more challenging for you to support your spouse, but you're going to feel like you're going to lose purpose when you do retire and have nothing else to do. It'll feel great that first few weeks, maybe a couple of months if you're lucky, because you think you'll get to do all the things that you want to do, if you're lucky enough and still even have the health to do it at that point. But it's going to slowly sink in that purpose that you've lived subconsciously for decades with is fading away. And that's going to make it really hard on you. And because it's going to make it hard on you, it's going to make it hard on your family.
Yeah. We've been talking about this recently just to kind of clue in the listeners about when we retire. And, this is the conversation we've had for a long time. And I think people talk about this in this dream world way instead of like, let's actually crunch the numbers and see what's realistic. And I think it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. We were sitting in a financial advisor's office. He looked over everything and he said, you guys could retire right now and you would be fine. You'd have to change some things, but you would be fine. And I remember feeling shocked at that, just feeling absolutely shocked. Now, could we have bought the farm and, put the pool in the pool house, all this stuff? No, that's not what he was saying. But he was saying, like, because of what we've saved, that we could essentially both quit working. We could live off that. We'd have to, downsize, and we could move forward. And you know what's wild? We had that conversation 6 or 7 years ago. We've been banging it out ever since, working. And for some reason, in the past week, when we've kind of revisited this and you looked at the numbers and you said, we could do this. I was like, oh yeah, I've known that in the back of my mind. I remember having that conversation with Kevin, but I was like, oh gosh, it's just, you get in this zone where you're like fighting or climbing or clawing, whatever your visual is. For me, it's just been like this steady, I'm walking. Sometimes it's up a hill, but I'm like, I'm going. And I'm not going to stop, because if I stop, then the whole thing falls apart. And we have to have this and every day maximize, and I can't miss that. And it's like, okay, we could do this. And at this point, we could do it even with the house that we have and the land that we have. And I could still drive my Lexus, like we could still do that, but it would change our life in some ways. We'd have to reevaluate some of the muscle cars we have and some of the other stuff and some travel. But I think now we're at the point in our life where we've got to disassociate the grind with our value, the grind with our future. Now we're at the place where we've got to figure out stress management, what we actually enjoy that can still bring in income, balance. Like we're in a new, and I don't think we're anywhere near being able to capture the season of life that we're in right now. And, if you're listening and you're like, well, it must be freaking nice. Sure, it is in so many ways. Yes. But we have been doing this together for 17 years to get here. And it hasn't always been fun. If you've listened to our previous episodes, we've been a little candid about our marriage and where we came from. But also this new season of life is hard too. Like figuring out who we are and how our profession plays into that and how that used to be everything. It used to be us. We were like the power couple. People have called us the power couple or whatever. And it was kind of like a role that we played, whether we asked for it or not. And what does the next season of life look like for us? And are we both going to be at the place at the same time where we're ready? You're a little bit older than me. We've talked about 55, 50, different things like that. I'm a few years behind you. And sometimes I do get those feelings in my stomach when you're like, okay, just a couple of years or 5 years or whatever it looks like. I'm like, I'm going to want to do it too. And then I'm like, will I? What will that look like? I don't know.
I think the first thing is realizing that retirement isn't stopping. It might mean stop doing what you're doing now for your main source of income so that you can do something that you want to do that's life-giving, and you're able to do it without regard for the amount of income that you receive to do it. But now, today is the best time for anybody to really focus on, in my opinion, identity and what is your true identity and what steps do you take all the time to remind yourself of that identity once you've figured it out. And it's something I've been working on intentionally, not every day, 24 hours a day, but regularly for years now, probably 5 years now. And while I'm at the point where I can talk about it and I have tools to remind myself of it, it's still a constant challenge. But I'm closer than what I would have been had I never been intentional about it. And the stronger you are in knowing what your identity is and reminding yourself of your identity and having a spouse to help you, to help remind you of your identity, the better off you'll be in your marriage as a parent and in your retirement when you get to that stage. But yeah, I talked about 50 and 55 for me, and I posted on LinkedIn just a couple days ago
I
a
saw that.
study of lifespan versus age at retirement, and it really lit up a lot of people's opinions. Some questioned the study, which it was actually a white paper. So it is a statistically based study. And I ended up referencing it and including it in the comments because nobody wants to, I can't say nobody, but a lot of people don't want to acknowledge the reality of it. And it's a breakdown. You'll see it goes just a screenshot from age 55, the average death for the statistical sample size of people in that research was 83 years old if you retire at 55. If you retired at 65, the average age of death went from 83 to 66. So you live a year. So that's pretty telling. It's not a guarantee. Like you might live to 60, work to 65, retire, and, suffer from identity crisis and feel like you're losing your purpose for 20 years instead of 2. I don't know which is worse. And then you die. But that's just something else to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's true. And I'll link that body of research in the show notes if anyone wants to go through and look at it. I thought people would freaking love it. I thought people would be like, let me get out of here. Yeah. But, it reminds me of where I was at 5, 6, 7 years ago, climbing the corporate ladder, wanting my base plus variable comp, plus flying on the private jet that our company bought into sometime, like I was jet setting, I was racking up the points on our American Airlines card. You know what I mean? Like where I was at then, if you said, hey, later you're going to buy a piece of land and you're going to walk away from your Louis Vuitton, I would have been like, and give up on life, give up on the tools and the skills and the abilities that God gave me. Like, never. I'm not lazy. I would have been like that 6 or 7 years ago. And it's wild, the shift now, but just because we've made the shift doesn't mean that other people have. So it's been a little isolating in that way. I was thinking about women in particular, and that might be sexist for me to say, but I was thinking about women when it comes to stay-at-home moms and times when a woman maybe doesn't differentiate between truly supporting their partner's growth and then losing themselves in the process. Because I hear a lot of women, you know, divorce statistics have sucked as they've been high for a long time. So this isn't like a new epidemic or whatever, but I see women getting more confident, I guess I would say, on making it on their own. And there's this part to this that's like beautiful, right? Like women, you don't have to rely on a man financially. Like you can bring whatever to the table. You're capable. Women should be in leadership. Like we don't need to be getting paid 83 cents on the dollar compared to men. Like I am a female. I see the data. I support that. But at the same time, what we need are healthier partnerships and marriages, not to throw our middle fingers up to our marriages. And I hear women specifically, is why I'm thinking about this, say like, I've lost myself because all I am is a mom. All I am is a wife. I've been in this essentially the support role for 20 years. And I don't even know who I am. And my first thought is that is not your kids or your spouse's fault. To blame it on your kid or your spouse is saying that you have no ownership in your life. So first, recognizing that is a very important step. But then second, once you're realizing that, and then realize you don't have to throw away the baby with the bathwater to resolve that. But I'm just thinking through times in our marriage where have we ever gotten off balance between the support versus self-sacrifice? I really couldn't think of a time, but I was thinking about like in general, stay-at-home moms and like times where I have seen people lose themselves, I guess. Have you heard people talk like that before? Like, I don't know who I am.
I've heard of it, but I think that goes back to identity too. If you're putting your identity in what you do every day versus who you are, it's easy to fall into that trap. And everybody does it, whether they're a business professional or a teacher or a parent or child or athlete or whatever. I, I just think it goes back to identity again, and having both halves of the marriage constantly focus on that.
Yeah, I agree. What practical things do you feel like has helped us shift from growing separately, like going down our own paths, to growing together, even if our paths look different?
Similar goals and constantly talking about them. All of the goals that we have, even if, they're a little bit different, the big goal, what we want is, I think, probably similar to what any marriage goal would be, which is to live a godly marriage, a joyful marriage, and support one another. And those are constant daily challenges, not because one person doesn't want to be supportive. I think it's just because of the distractions that take their time from being supportive to focus on something else that is self-fulfilling.
I would say on my end, when I saw you, and I mean, you're still kind of going through this, trying to determine how much you want your output to be focused on work versus the balance of your health, fatherhood, time on the farm, downtime, working with your hands, doing things you really enjoy versus the things that are bringing you money right now. And I feel like I'm like, okay, I've been doing the same thing for 3 years. Like I'm working on the business, writing another book. I'm still putting out podcast episodes. This episode's like, I don't know, 104, whenever it comes out, it's in the hundreds now. And I don't feel bothered that we're not on the same path. And that's not because like we're only 4 years apart. So it's not like we have like this huge age gap or whatever. I just feel like I do have more flexibility in my work than I ever have. And so I feel like I'm on the path with you, even though I am still grinding in my business. My grinding looks much different than it used to, especially since I get to work at home, especially since I only have a few contractors and automations with my team. I don't have full-time employees that I'm handling or that I'm working with every day. Like the flexibility is different. I set the terms with my clients. I can kind of turn the knob up or turn the knob down as I need. So even though I still feel like we're not necessarily going in the exact same direction professionally, we are going in the same direction, to your point, toward our goals, our financial goals, our marriage goals, our goals as parents, as our child moves toward high school. I mean, there's days where I want to be irresponsible. Like I want a house in freaking Seaside, Florida, and that dream will not die. And I want to go on one of those freaking trips with the Four Seasons. Gosh dang, they got me. I want to fly their private jet and I want to go to 8 of their locations and I want to just do that. So there's some days where I'm like, we only live once. We've saved up all this freaking money. Why would we just live off the interest and then leave Keegan millions? Like why wouldn't we just spend it? And I don't know, maybe TBD. Maybe we get 5 years more down the path and maybe we do start living like that a little bit more. But it can't be balls to the wall because then we'll have nothing left. So being strategic about what we're going to blow cash on when we get there, my only thought is like, how will we know when we get there? When is enough ever enough? This has been like the lifelong quest.
Yep, I think it's just constant communication about what those goals are, what they look like, and the time frame might change a little bit here and there. It might move up, might move back from one day to the next. But that's the importance of the communication about it. So we don't agree on making the retirement date in 3 years from today. Then we don't talk about it again. And then in 3 years, we're like, yeah, that's not happening. Or why didn't we do this 2 years ago?
Yeah, and I think the goal is to be working half retired anyway. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do right now, right? Like it's just it's something we've never done, so we're not doing it well yet, but I think we'll do it better over time.
Yeah, if it's a mind hack, you gotta have it. And it would be strange, at least at this age, and I would say really until you can't, I don't think the word retirement is in the Bible. And that's because it's we're here to serve. And whether you're getting paid to do it or not, it's still an opportunity to serve. But I don't know when, at what age to get to the point to where it is a wise move to focus purely on serving. And if it pays nothing, that's fine. If it does, that's fine. I think it just depends on keeping your eyes open and looking for it. When that opportunity presents itself, then talk about it some more.
Yeah. So you mentioned you don't think the word retirement's in the Bible. Let's talk about how our faith plays into this. I know, your work with identity is rooted in your faith journey. I know we've talked before on the show about how our reputation is in the Lord, but how do you feel like our faith has anchored us when our identities were shifting or when we felt out of sync or even now in this season?
How our identity has anchored us.
How our faith has anchored us.
Linking, I mean, the one of the sources of our identity is our faith. I think that's a pretty safe bet to associate your identity with. So because we've ingrained that as part of our identity or as our identity, it's a lot easier to navigate hardships. It's a lot easier to actually be thankful for a hardship when you're going through it, when it might make sense to nobody else. It doesn't mean it's easier, or it's something that we enjoy, but it helps navigate through the hardship a little bit better, just helps with perspective.
Yeah, I would say I wish that I had done this sooner. And maybe I thought that I had, but this has been the first year when I'm on my gratitude walks when I'm saying my 100 plus things I'm grateful for and I'm walking around the lake. One of the things I've started saying that I'm grateful for have been hard things. And I'm not just saying like I'm grateful for hard things. I will be like I am grateful that that employee freaking quit and gave me no notice. I am grateful that employee told me that it would be better for her mental health if we never spoke again. Like I am very specific. I am grateful for the obstacle of this with this client. I am grateful that X has been hard with my family. Like I'm being really specific, and it's not ironic that my perspective has shifted. I know that it's not ironic that now I'm looking at those and similar situations in a completely different way. I can feel my heart soften. I can feel forgiveness happen. I can feel and see me looking at things with different eyes. I mean, literally, we're asked to pray to see things through Jesus's eyes, break my heart for what breaks yours. And it's wild how I've actually seen those things start to shift in my perspective. And I don't think that it's impossible for me to go backwards and start ignoring that again. But right now I happen to be in a season where the perspective is healthy. It's been a good one.
Helps with stress and anxiety and blood pressure and cholesterol and everything else. I think it's a big reason why people die younger than what they should, is being okay with the day-to-day challenges, being thankful for them rather than stressing so much about them and the things that never even happen. But that is also a lot easier said than done.
My Reiki healer the other day said that she was kind of saying it tongue in cheek, but she meant it. You can tell someone's central nervous system regulation by watching them in a vehicle. If they get pissed immediately, if they fly off the handle, if they feel like other people are trying to cut them off, or they feel like everyone's against them or whatever, you can tell that they're dysregulated. Because otherwise, you can handle obstacles a lot easier. or in a different way, a healthier way. It's not like you don't see them, you just view them in a different way. And I thought that was interesting that she was like, yeah, you can tell nervous system regulation from somebody behind the wheel. I liked that. Okay, let's wrap with this. If a couple is listening right now and they're in a season of misalignment, one of them is growing fast, one of them is feeling left behind, what's one thing that you would tell them to start doing today?
Start an identity devotional.
Write a book about a
Well,
topic that you really need to learn about yourself. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, or instead of them reminding each other what to do, they can remind themselves that they can work on themselves and serve each other. I mean, just starting with something like that. Something as simple as saying that to each other. I'm going to work on myself and serve you instead of work on you and have you serve me. Because that's never going to work. What human being can you go up to, anybody go up to and say, I'm going to work on you and you're going to serve me? And it actually works out well. But how would even somebody that you don't know, they might look at you and they might be confused when you say it, but they would appreciate it after they processed it. And you go up to them and you say, I'm going to work on me and I'm going to serve you. It's going to be received a little bit better.
Yeah. And so true. Anytime I had a therapist tell me years ago, anytime that you're saying to yourself, I don't deserve this, or I deserve better, or whatever, those are selfish phrases that we've learned in our society. Those aren't of God. That's not biblical. And so anytime we're doing that, if we start taking that inward attention and we push that attention outward to others, we'll be amazed at how much better we magically feel all of a sudden because we've stopped thinking about ourselves and what we're getting and what we deserve and what we need and how no one else is thinking of us. Because the truth is, no one is thinking of us as much as we're thinking of ourselves.
I think Rick Warren said in the very beginning of, I don't remember what book it was, but it's not about you. And people who are so stressed out all of the time, they make everything about themselves without realizing it. That's why they're stressed out, because they're not getting what they want. And they want it so bad, they think they deserve it. And if it's not about you, then it doesn't mean, I mean, to me, I don't feel like I deserve anything, which it makes me thankful to have the things that I have because I know I don't.
Yeah, that's good. Well, anything else you'd add before we wrap today?
Hopefully I can have the beginning of a devotional together. If anybody wants it, I'll have a URL set for it.
Oh, I like that. By when? This episode's going to release on, I think, January 6th. That's a month and 5 days from now from when we're recording.
Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll see.
Okay. Yeah. Well, nothing wrong with a good milestone, a good timeline to work on. But yeah, that's awesome. I'll link Terry's website in the show notes. I recommend that you follow him on Instagram because I'm sure he'll be posting things on there, or on TikTok. He's active on there on occasion. So I would look him up. What's your TD Roberts for Instagram?
TD Rob.
TD Rob.
And everything else is Mortgage Tip Daily.
Okay. Give him a follow. Give me a follow. If you haven't subscribed to the show, what are you doing? Please subscribe on YouTube. I would love it if you would do that. And then also follow on Apple and on Spotify. Why not? You're listening to this show. I put my time in. I've been doing this show for 2 years. If I have brought you any value whatsoever, I would really appreciate it if you'd leave a review, follow the show, share it with a friend, share it with your spouse. We put a lot of thought into these shows, and I'm here to serve you all. And it's so fun when you write in and tell me what you'd like to hear more of, or even less of. Gosh, I'm open to your feedback. So anyway, I would love it if you'd subscribe and follow. We know that being intentional with life can be more chaotic than it really should be because of all of the distractions that we have going on. But the work is worth it. So don't waste the chaos. Embrace it. Until next time.